On July 15, the Ridgefield Press reported that Eliza Trachtenberg, executive director of Ridgefield Pride, and her trans daughter Eva had obtained permission to paint a rainbow crosswalk at the corner of Main and Prospect Streets. If you have driven through that intersection recently, you may have noticed the rainbow crosswalk has not materialized. Fortunately, the group learned that First Selectman Rudy Marconi lacked the authority to approve this project before they commenced the project. But the story caught the attention of Chris Murray, a candidate for the Board of Selectmen who expressed his reservations at the Board of Selectmen's meeting on August 16.
State roads require that the crosswalks be white, which is a safety consideration. If drivers aren't making the distinction between state and municipal roads and the rules associated with crosswalks and how they're painted. We found some municipalities that had approved these rainbow crosswalks and then walked them back, basically repainted them. My point simply is that I think that this issue is kind of a liability / danger rabbit hole for everybody, not just the town. I would encourage Ridgefield, Connecticut Pride to not associate themselves with something like this. It just takes one mistake and all of a sudden, you know, their name is associated with it, and then everybody's asking, how does this happen?
First Selectman Marconi made it clear that this issue is out of the Board of Selectmen's jurisdiction and exceeds their authority.
Crosswalks for the general public are under the jurisdiction of the police commission or local roads. We don't have the authority, but we can certainly opine on it individually or collectively, and thank you for your comments.
Nonetheless, it appears that a Ridgefield Pride presentation is on the board's agenda for September 6 at 7:30 p.m. and is item 5 on the agenda. While it is unclear what the subject of their presentation is, they recently gave a presentation to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the short and long of which is this.
So just to let you know, the short and the long is that we would very much like to paint a pride crosswalk in the town to let everybody know that we're an inclusive, caring, warm and friendly town and that everybody is welcome and belongs here.
What could possibly be wrong with that? This benign symbol of inclusion and acceptance that welcomes everybody to Ridgefield. One possible issue is how at least one theologian sees the Pride movement as a new religion. Here, Dr. Matthew Roberts, the minister of Trinity Church of York, England, explains the case.
What we really are seeing at the moment is that this is has become an established religion. There is in all sorts of ways in which Pride has the characteristics of a religion. It has its own religious rituals. It has its own religious processions. You see here aerial shot of a Pride march, which now happen in basically every town in the country, and very similar, I think, to what you would have seen in medieval times with saints' processions through the streets. It's become something which has its own liturgical calendar. Lots of people have noticed that. Of course, in the past, when Christianity was dominant, then the Christian calendar just defined where you were in the year, and that's now been replaced with this another annual calendar, but which has 1 month of the year blocked out entirely as Pride Month. So in what way is this a religion? And I think the answer to that is to say, no, it really is a religion, but it is a religion that worships a different deity to the things we normally think of as religions: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism. And the deity that it worships is the self and the freedom of the self. So the title of my book is Identity and the Worship of Self.
So what if it is a religion? If so, painting a permanent Pride crosswalk on a publicly owned road would arguably violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. But this, not simply a benign symbol of an inclusive, compassionate, and accepting religion. It is powerful, evangelistic, and seeks to expand its congregation. Dr. Roberts explains.
It's a movement that has its own dogmas, its own doctrines that you are required to believe. It has very strong teachings about the nature of humanity, about the way that society should be, and the kind of what makes a true human being. Those things are highly dogmatic, and then it has this very strong moral code of its own, which is, of course, very, very closely connected to that we must all conform to.
That conformity requires a devout faith in such things as transgender women who are biological males competing in women athletics, who change in the women's locker room and use the girls' bathroom. It demands embrace of drag story hours for small children in schools and libraries. It defends rights of groups like Little Sisters of Self-Indulgence to mock and lampoon the Catholic faith and to privilege in school gender shifting of children shielded in secrecy from their parents, and converting schools into sanctuaries for evangelizing the youngest and most vulnerable in the name of safety and justice.
I think in the whole package of sex education that is being put in schools. So one thing that a number of people have noticed and drawn attention to as an example of this is something put out by the Proud Trust called the Dice Game. Here it is. This is so horrific that I wish we didn't have to talk about it. Designed for 13-year-old children, but there's this 6-sided dice, of which you can see 3 of the sides there. We didn't even want to show you what was on the other 3 sides. And the idea is the children should throw 2 of these dice and then talk about how they could gain sexual pleasure by putting these 2 different body parts together. Designed for 13-year-old children. What's happening here is that children at younger and younger ages, because of this dogma, this religious belief that fulfilling the sexual desires of the self is the thing that leads you to fulfillment and happiness, but because of that, children are being led into more and more sexual experimentation and more damaging sexual behaviors, and having their natural resistance to sexual advances from others brought lower and lower and lower, that it's horrifically damaging to a whole generation of children, both in terms of their vulnerability to adults and also, of course, in what they do and are encouraged to do to each other.
The consequences are often irreversible and horrific.
Tragically, because the self is not God, and because this is not a true account of what a human being is, that therefore there are some pretty serious destructive effects of all of this. This whole way of thinking, this whole, could we call it a religious cosmology that says that reality is found inside yourself and the self is the deity, it leads to terrible destruction. By teaching people, and particularly teaching children, that fulfillment and happiness and you almost want to say enlightenment or salvation are found by following your heart, even when, and perhaps especially when, it leads you to want to do drastic damage to your body. That what's happening there is that children and adults are being dreadfully harmed. That the power of any religion and the power of a false religion is that it does blind people's eyes. And the incredible thing is we're in a situation where something so obviously horrific as a movement that encourages children to sterilize and mutilate their own bodies has been accepted pretty widely and with pretty open arms by a lot of people. Now, how can that come about? And the answer to that is because the underlying religious conviction about the primacy of the self and that who you are is defined by your feeling. That's got so deeply embedded, and that's been embedded by the Pride movement from its inception.
But the Ridgefield Pride movement wants you to believe that a rainbow crosswalk is simply a welcoming symbol of acceptance. But Newton's third law teaches us that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And reactions to rainbow crosswalks have proved to often be magnets for vandalism and graffiti, and can prove to be very high maintenance. And what precedent might this set to demonstrate that Ridgefield is an open and welcoming community, Do we need rainbow traffic signs, a rainbow traffic light, or possibly rainbow uniforms for our police and firefighters? Must East Ridge Middle School be rebranded the Harvey Milk School? First Selectman Marconi made it clear that this issue is out of the Board of Selectmen's jurisdiction and exceeds their authority.
Crosswalks for the general public are under the jurisdiction of the police commission or local roads. We don't have the authority, but we can certainly opine on it individually or collectively, and thank you for your comments.
Perhaps we will learn what prompted him to include this on the agenda for Wednesday, September 6, and have an opportunity in public comment to share thoughts on this symbolic but important topic.
This is Kurt Carr, on the record. Thank you for watching.